September 15th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The world wakes to a new reality. The 10-nation BRICS bloc has slapped a 100% tariff on all U.S. imports. This isn't just a trade dispute, it's a declaration that American economic dominance is over. Nearly half the world's population is now rewriting the rules, shattering decades of U.S.-led global order. The impact is immediate. Markets in chaos, prices set to double, and uncertainty gripping every household. The era of stable, predictable trade is gone, replaced by confrontation and upheaval. The world holds its breath, waiting for Washington's next move. This crisis has been years in the making, fueled by rising resentment and a series of escalating confrontations between the world's largest economies. The seeds of discord were sown long before the headlines as trade disputes simmered beneath the surface, and ordinary people took to the streets to protest policies they felt left them behind. Over time, these tensions only grew, as both sides dug in their heels, unwilling to compromise on what they saw as vital national interests. The return of Donald Trump to the White House in 2025 marked a turning point. His campaign rallies were filled with promises to put America first, and his supporters cheered as he vowed to take a tougher stance on global trade. Once in office, Trump wasted no time in making good on those promises, signaling a new era of confrontation with America's economic rivals. Central to Trump's agenda was the America First doctrine, a policy that prioritized U.S. interests above all else. This approach directly targeted the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, especially as they accelerated efforts to reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar in international trade. The administration viewed these moves as a direct threat to American economic dominance, and tensions quickly escalated. In February, the situation reached a boiling point. President Trump issued a stark ultimatum. If BRICS continued their de-dollarization campaign, the U.S. would impose 100% tariffs on their exports. This threat sent shockwaves through global markets, as investors and governments alike braced for a potential trade war of unprecedented scale. By June, the administration followed through on its threats, slapping 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from Brazil, China, and the UAE. These measures hit key industries hard, disrupting supply chains and driving up costs for manufacturers and consumers on both sides of the dispute. The situation deteriorated further in July as the U.S. expanded tariffs to cover a wide range of consumer goods. Only a handful of sectors were spared, and the impact rippled through global trade networks, affecting everything from electronics to household items. Businesses scrambled to adapt, while ordinary people began to feel the pinch of rising prices. The final straw came when Trump called on the European Union to join his campaign against China and India, specifically targeting their continued purchases of Russian oil. This move further isolated the BRICS nations and deepened the divide between East and West, as energy markets became a new battleground in the escalating conflict. Faced with mounting pressure and economic hardship, BRICS leaders convened an emergency summit. Behind closed doors, they debated their options and ultimately agreed on a bold plan for massive retaliation. The stakes had never been higher, and the world watched anxiously as the bloc prepared its response. Rather than backing down, the BRICS nations found new unity in the face of adversity. They coordinated their policies, strengthened economic ties, and announced sweeping countermeasures. This unprecedented show of solidarity triggered today's economic showdown, reshaping the global order in ways few could have predicted. In the end, Washington's pressure campaign backfired, galvanizing the BRICS alliance into decisive action. What began as a series of policy disputes has now erupted into a full-blown economic confrontation, the consequences of which will be felt around the world for years to come. BRICS began as a loose coalition of emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and later South Africa, brought together by a shared desire to reshape the global order. In the early days, these nations were united more by what they opposed than by what they had in common, a world dominated by Western powers, where their voices were often sidelined in major decisions. Over time, however, this informal grouping transformed into something far more significant. Today, BRICS has grown into a formidable alliance of 10 member countries, each bringing its own strengths, resources, and ambitions to the table. This expansion has not only increased the group's economic clout, but also its ability to influence global affairs. At its core, BRICS seeks to counterbalance the dominance of the West, especially the United States and its allies, by advocating for a fairer, more multipolar world. The group envisions a global system where power is more evenly distributed, and where emerging economies have a real say in shaping the future. The repeated use of U.S. sanctions against various countries has served as a wake-up call for BRICS members. These sanctions revealed just how vulnerable their economies were to American financial control, especially through the dominance of the U.S. dollar in international trade and banking. This vulnerability became a rallying point, fueling a collective push for de-dollarization and greater financial independence. In response, BRICS countries have taken bold steps to build alternative financial systems. Initiatives like the BRICS Bridge and the New Development Bank are designed to bypass U.S. influence, allowing member states to trade, invest, and lend on their own terms. These new systems are not just symbolic, they represent a real shift in the balance of global economic power. With the addition of 13 partner nations, BRICS now wields unprecedented economic and strategic power. Together, these countries account for a significant share of the world's population, resources, and GDP. Their cooperation extends beyond economics, touching on technology, security, and even cultural exchange. Of course, internal divisions remain. India, for example, is often cautious about aligning too closely with China, given their historical rivalries and ongoing border disputes. These tensions sometimes threaten to undermine the group's unity, as each member pursues its own national interests. Yet external pressures like U.S. tariffs and trade wars have had a unifying effect. Facing common challenges from Washington, BRICS members have found new reasons to stand together, setting aside old grievances in pursuit of shared goals. The threat from Washington has forged a new sense of consensus among BRICS nations, often overriding deep-seated rivalries and historical mistrust. In the face of external adversity, the coalition has discovered its collective strength. Now more than ever, BRICS stands ready to challenge the United States and its allies head-on, determined to carve out a new role for itself on the world stage. In the end, the coalition's unity, born out of opposition and strengthened by adversity, remains its greatest weapon as it seeks to reshape the global order for generations to come. The BRICS tariff announcement sent global markets into freefall. Wall Street plunged 15% in an hour, erasing trillions in value. The dollar wobbled, commodities like oil and gold soared, and panic spread. For consumers, prices on everyday goods are set to jump at least 20% overnight. President Trump's defiant response did little to calm nerves. The numbers aren't just headlines, they're lost pensions, shuttered businesses, and rising household costs. The tariff war's impact is immediate and personal. The day the tariffs hit will be remembered as a turning point for the global economy. The shockwaves from Wall Street are now hitting Main Street. Everyday Americans will feel the pain as tariffs double the cost of essentials, from phones to coffee. For families already struggling, this is a direct blow to their budgets. Farmers and manufacturers lose key export markets overnight, facing financial ruin and layoffs. Rising prices and job losses create a vicious cycle, threatening a deep recession. The very workers Trump promised to protect are now on the front lines of this economic war. The crisis is no longer abstract, it's a daily reality for millions. The most vulnerable will bear the heaviest burden. The economic crisis is now a political firestorm in Washington. Trump, once seen as a strong negotiator, faces backlash from both parties as markets crash and recession looms. Republicans from farm states and pro-business leaders are furious. Democrats call it a self-inflicted disaster. The Federal Reserve faces impossible choices: fight inflation or prevent a deeper recession. National security officials warn of global instability. Trump is cornered: de-escalate and admit defeat, or double down and risk even greater fallout. His next move will shape not just the economy, but his presidency and legacy. The stakes have never been higher. Economists around the world are sounding the alarm. This is truly uncharted territory. The scale and complexity of the current trade standoff between the US and the BRICS nations is unlike anything seen before in modern economic history. While trade disputes have erupted in the past, experts agree that a conflict of this magnitude, involving such a large share of the global economy, is unprecedented. The consensus is clear: in a trade war of this scale, there are no true winners. Every side stands to lose, and the ripple effects could be felt for years, if not decades, to come. Both the United States and the BRICS countries are poised to suffer significant economic setbacks. The immediate impacts are already visible. Stock markets are tumbling, investor confidence is shaken, and fears of a global recession are mounting. but the consequences go far beyond just numbers on a screen. As the world's two largest economic blocs clash, the resulting uncertainty is dragging down the global economy, threatening jobs, businesses, and livelihoods in every corner of the world. The interconnected nature of today's markets means that no country is truly insulated from the fallout. Europe and Asia in particular find themselves in an especially precarious position. These regions are deeply reliant on trade with both the US and the BRICS nations, and any disruption in these relationships could have devastating consequences. Supply chains that stretch across continents are at risk of being severed, threatening industries from manufacturing to technology. For many European and Asian economies, the prospect of being caught in the crossfire is a source of growing anxiety, as leaders scramble to find ways to mitigate the damage. Some experts are warning that this conflict could do more than just disrupt trade. It could accelerate the fragmentation of the global financial system itself. As trust erodes and alliances shift, there is a real risk that the world could split into competing economic blocs, each with its own rules, currencies, and standards. Such a scenario would make international cooperation far more difficult and could undermine decades of progress toward economic integration and stability. Despite calls for economic independence, the reality is that BRICS nations cannot fully decouple from the United States, nor can the US isolate itself from the rest of the world. The global economy is simply too interconnected. Any attempt to sever these ties will result in pain on all sides: lost markets, disrupted supply chains, and diminished growth prospects. The economic wounds inflicted by such a split would be deep and slow to heal. In this tense environment, the best hope lies in a swift return to the negotiating table. Diplomacy and compromise are the only paths to a sustainable solution. If talks break down, however, the world could spiral into a more divided and hostile economic order, marked by protectionism, mistrust, and ongoing conflict. The stakes could not be higher, and the choices made in the coming weeks will shape the global economy for generations. History offers a sobering lesson. Major trade wars in the past have often led to even greater conflicts, both economic and political. The Great Depression, for example, was deepened by protectionist policies and retaliatory tariffs. The world cannot afford to repeat these mistakes. Learning from history is essential if we are to avoid repeating its darkest chapters. Today, the world is on edge. Leaders, businesses, and ordinary people alike are watching events unfold with a mix of anxiety and hope, praying that cooler heads will prevail. The decisions made now will determine not just the fate of economies, but the future of global cooperation and peace. The world waits for Washington and Beijing's next moves. Trump could escalate with embargoes or asset seizures, risking global depression, or back-channel diplomacy could offer a way out, if both sides can save face. The EU faces a defining choice: side with the US, stay neutral, or mediate. Other nations will be forced to pick sides in a new economic Cold War. Long-term, this crisis will speed up de-dollarization and the rise of alternative financial systems. The era of hyper-globalization is ending. A new age of great power rivalry is here. The rules of the global economy are being rewritten in real time. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about your future. The global trade web that keeps shelves stocked and jobs secure is more fragile than we thought. Your savings, job, and daily expenses are all at risk in this crisis. A prolonged trade war threatens everyone's financial security. The world is at a crossroads: cooperation or division, prosperity or protectionism. The choices made now will shape the world for years to come. Stay informed, demand accountability, and understand what's at stake. The future of the global order and your place in it is being decided right now.